Hello, let's do some observational sketching using some pumpkin scraps. These are from my kitchen and I couldn't let it go for a waste. They look really beautiful to sketch and I thought I can give it a go using watercolor and ink technique. I'm going to start off a very rough sketch using a pencil, just getting the basic shape of the pumpkin pieces in front of me. I can actually go straight on with a pen, but because I like to add in some more details and just want to feel a little bit more confident with my sketches, I decided to start off with a pencil. Once I have a rough shape of all the pumpkin pieces in front of me, I can then go on and use a little bit of pen and ink to start adding in some details, some value, some thick and thin lines, etc. For ink, I'm using a waterproof sketching ink from Roja and Klinger, and I'm using my favorite dip pen. I'm going to start off with some ink sketches, looking for the details that I like to add in my sketch, and starting off with the beautiful pumpkin seeds in the middle, just adding in some texture for the center of that pumpkin. I just love doing texture. That is why I'm concentrating more on this area. I'm going to sketch out the other two pieces as well using the same dip pen, just adding in darker areas with heavier lines and lighter areas with lighter lines. The initial pencil drawing was quite rough, and I think I have made a little bit of changes with pen right now because I did feel that it wasn't looking really right initially using pencil. So when I started using my pen, I realized where I need to make the changes. Now that I have my line drawings ready, I'm going to have some fun with some splashes of watercolors. So I'm starting off with some ultramarine blue for the darkest areas or the shadow areas, just marking them out. I love using this technique of marking out the shadow areas using shadow color, and here it's ultramarine blue today. Now I'm going to use some bright yellow, and the yellow that I'm using here is yellow ochre for the bright yellow inside of the pumpkin. And I'm just going to place them loosely in a very medium consistency. For the outside of the pumpkin, which is bright orange, I'm going to use pyrrole orange. You can also use cadmium orange if you have that. And I'm using the watercolor in a very medium consistency, quite watery still. And I'm just going to drop in some pigment, just letting it bleed into the yellow as well. So I am not trying to color in within the outlines that I've drawn. I'm just trying to incorporate watercolor as a quick and loose wash for this drawing, so I'm just going to drop in some orange where I think it's needed, especially the center part, which is a little bit darker as well. I'm going to use some orange along with the ultramarine blue. They would create a nice brown or a deeper color, just showing depth to the inside. And you can see that the orange is sort of bleeding into the yellow color that we added initially, which is still wet, so you can see why it's bleeding, and that's completely fine. And we're just trying to create a very loose watercolor wash here. And for the deeper areas, which is the inside of the pumpkin with the seeds and all the inside matter, I'm going to use some orange, the same orange and ultramarine blue, mixed together to create a deep brown or grey color for the depth of the pumpkin. I also like adding some spatter just to keep the whole thing loose and exciting. I'm just going to lift out some color from the left hand side of the pumpkin piece, because I do feel that I added color there which wasn't really necessary, so I just used a tissue to lift that out. And now for some shadows. You can see there is a nice shadow on the white paper where the pumpkin is placed. So I'm going to do that shadow, and I'm going to use ultramarine blue. The orange of the pumpkin is still wet, which means when I place the shadow, it is going to bleed into each other, which is completely fine. I am looking for that sort of connection and that sort of bleed, so it doesn't look separate from the pumpkin, so that the shadow doesn't look separate from the pumpkin. So starting off with a little bit of ultramarine blue, you can already see it's turning into a brown because of how it's mixing with the orange. You can see that the orange is bleeding into the blue, which is completely fine. I absolutely love the effect when it bleeds into each other. So I'm just going to top it up with a little bit more ultramarine blue. So this time I did not add any more water, just go straight into the palette and get some extra ultramarine blue. So I've got a nice shadow there, and I'm going to just water it down towards the edges, just using some water and just touching that wash at the edge there, just softening the edge and let it bleed into the outside as well. Moving on to the next sketch, I'm just going to use the same techniques and keeping it quite loose. I'm going to finish the other two sketches as well. So I'm starting off with the pyrrole orange here this time. And if I look closely, I can see the light reflections on the left, which means I'm going to keep it quite light on the left. So just adding in some orange first, and then I can just use some water to soften the edges and keep them light towards the edges. For the inside of the pumpkin, again, I'm going to use some yellow ochre. Again, the orange is still wet, so the orange could bleed into the yellow, which again is completely fine. The yellow that I'm using here is a little bit more watery compared to orange, so just giving it a light feel or a lighter color. The left side has a lot of light reflection because the light falls from the left side, so I'm just going to leave a lot of white just to depict that bright highlight. Again, for the inside of the pumpkin, I'm going to start with a bit of orange and then mix it with ultramarine blue to get some deep brown. You can vary it, adding more ultramarine blue to get grey as well. To make it more simple, all I look for is the dark and the light areas, and once you know the color, you can just continue placing the darker and the lighter areas accordingly. So here I am just placing all the darker areas of the pumpkin scrap in front of me. And for the stem, I'm going to start off with the same deep grey of ultramarine blue and pyrrole orange, and then I'm going to finish it off with some olive green. So just a tinge of olive green just to suggest the green color of the stem. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave it more on the grey side or the darker side, just like how I see it. I'm going to give a shadow now, so using ultramarine blue again, just defining the shadow. I'm also going to add some more deeper color, let's say mixture of ultramarine blue and pyrrole orange again, especially the inside of the pumpkin where all the seeds and the inside bits are, just giving it more depth. So if you add a deeper shadow or a contrasting color in the center, the outside of that pumpkin automatically becomes lighter, or it feels lighter, and this way you can see there's a lot of depth in this sketch now. I'm just going to make it a little bit more fluid, bit more loose, just adding in some water, just softening the edges. I can even add some more spatters if I like. I'm going to finish off the final piece of pumpkin as well using the same techniques. I hope you really enjoyed watching this video and that I was able to share some techniques with you today. I'll see you soon with my next video. Bye.